Hey everybody, it's Bob Crossan, Senior Managing Editor for Water and Waste Digest. Today I have with me Joe Fazio. He's the VP of Customer Success and Data for Flume, as well as the CEO and founder of Flume, Eric Adler. We're going to be talking a little bit about water data as it relates to the drought, conservation efforts that are going on out west, and some of the findings that they've found through their product. So, Joe and Eric, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate you guys taking the time. I saw that you guys just released a lot of information about those conservation efforts out west, and it seemed really worthwhile and timely to discuss this considering the drought levels that we're seeing out there. I wanted to start first with kind of like water usage rates and how Flume factors into that. Could you describe how Flume gathers this data and how you guys were able to learn about things that were going on with this drought out west?
Yeah, absolutely. I can answer that one initially. So before Flume, these utilities and customers are basically receiving a data point once every month or once every 2 months, right? That was really the only time you're able to see how much water was being used. But you weren't able to understand how water is used on a daily basis, an hourly basis, minute by minute. There was no kind of granular information there. And so our approach was, how can we take this data and go from a monthly data point down to a minute by minute data point and really provide that to both customers, the consumer, as well as utility partners. And the way we do it is fairly simple from a high level perspective. It's a sensor that just straps around your existing water meter. So if you get a bill from your city, you have a water meter, our sensor goes directly on the side of that water meter, takes about 10 to 15 minutes to install, and it monitors a magnet inside of the meter. We do it in real time. We send that data off to the homeowner as well as the utility. And you can see that granularity down to about a 5 second interval. So that is really kind of how we capture that data from the meter and provide it to our customers.
That's an incredibly granular amount of data. When you're talking about that low, 5 seconds on the grand scheme of like a month is crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty granular. And the reason we do it down to that level is so we can actually notify customers eventually, how much water is being used by fixture, whether it's a toilet, a shower, irrigation system, water softener. Once you have that level of granular information, you can start kind of picking apart each of those different usages inside of the home, provide that to the user.
Yeah. So just out of for my curiosity, is that do you have additional things that are working on this data to recognize based on patterns and whatnot that like you said, this is likely a toilet flush or this is a shower. How have you guys gone about doing that kind of thing if that's something that you do?
Yeah, we
Yeah,
actually
Joe,
have.
that one.
Oh, yeah, sure. We actually have a machine learning team that basically takes all of this 5 second data and then disaggregates it into these end uses. And initially, we've gotten very good about basically disaggregating data into both indoor and outdoor use. So today, our customers can look at the app on their phone and they can see exactly how much water every minute is being used inside and versus outside, which is really useful, especially in places like hot, dry places like California, Arizona, Nevada, Texas. The majority of your water is being used outside. And one of the things that as soon as somebody installs our app, one of the things they're usually shocked by is actually A, how much water they're using, and B, how much water they're actually using outside. Like, oh my God, it's 1,000 gallons to water my lawn every day. That doesn't seem right. So being able to disaggregate the uses to indoor and outdoor is super valuable. What we're just about to release is then going one step further, which then disaggregates that data into end uses. So toilets, showers, dishwashers, wash machines, et cetera.
Mm,
So that's kind of our next thing that's coming out next quarter. And we're going to be providing that data both to the homeowners as well as to the water utilities as well. And that's something that's of great interest to the utilities because they want to know things like what percent of toilets out there are actually efficient toilets? Are there still a lot of 3 gallon per flush toilets out there, or are most people using 1.4 gallon per flush toilets? So data like that is extremely valuable to the water utilities.
yeah. Well, I wanted. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Eric.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so I wanted to kind of jump back. I mentioned at the top kind of this data that you recently published about the about the drought out west and conservation efforts and stuff like that. What are some of the findings that you found, especially with this Western drought, that that are relevant to this conversation of conservation and water use?
Well, the drought is very dire in California, certainly, and in fact, most of the West. And what we're finding is that a lot of our utility partners that we're working with are, I mean, the situation's become dire. I mean, whereas they may run out of water if they don't actually start some very major conservation programs. One of the counties that we reported in our last report was Marin County, and Marin County is actually has they're actually trying to reduce their water use by 40%, which is that's a lot.
Yeah.
So that means basically stop watering your lawn. You know, you start taking shorter showers. There's a lot of sacrifices to be made by actually the homeowners on that in order to make that happen. And what we're able to do for Marin County is we're actually able to provide them with the data to see if their actual drought restrictions are working, because they're actually imposing drought restrictions on the homeowners. You know, you can only water a certain number of times a week. So they want to actually be able to see if their messaging is working. Are people actually responding? And that was some of the data we reported yesterday. In fact, you can actually go and see data at index.flumewater.com. And some of those graphs are there. And one of the things you will see is that you will see that Marin's outdoor water use is actually decreasing, while the rest of California right now, as we get into the hot summer, is actually increasing. So there's some pretty interesting graphs in there that show that their conservation efforts are actually working.
Hmm. Yeah.
And
Sorry. Go ahead, Eric.
I was saying to lay onto that, Joe. I think one of the things we're seeing too with these water utilities is that as Joe was saying, it's a very tough situation with the drought, and they haven't been able to basically provide customers with a tool to change their habits and change their usage. And so, we can help provide these utilities with data, but then with the actual app itself, arms those customers with the data they need to change their usage, to understand where inefficiencies are in the home. And that has been kind of one of the challenges that the utilities have run into over the past decade, that now we're really helping them solve that issue.
Yeah. It's almost gamification in a way. Like
It
it's like,
is,
oh, how
yeah.
low can I get it?
Yeah, it
Yeah,
is. We do see
absolutely.
that. And
Yeah.
honestly, if you're a utility telling your customers to cut water use by 40%, and you only give them a bill once a month, and they have no other way to actually know if they're reducing their water by 40%, that's a hard ask. So by giving them a tool like Flume, they can actually monitor their water usage, minute by minute, day by day, and actually see if they're actually reaching their goals. And we give them ways to actually create budgets, and we alarm them if they're going over their budgets. So it really gives the utilities a tool now to give to their homeowners and say, yes, I want you to decrease by 40%. And here's a tool to actually help you get there. It really provides something they didn't have before in their toolkit.
Yeah, that kind of answers what my next question was, is like, how does this inform the messaging that utilities do? I imagine that now that they're armed with some data, they can say, hey, here are the 6 steps that you can take to reduce and meet the requirements that we're trying to meet. Is that something that you are seeing? How is messaging evolving because of this more real-time like data?
Yeah, so on the consumer side, the app is essentially arming those customers with the information they need, right? Because now
Mhm.
you as a customer can see, okay, as Joe was saying, my outdoor usage, every time I use irrigation, it's using 1,500 gallons of water 4 times a week, right? And you may realize that that's actually way more than you actually need. You can cut that down to half that and save significant amount of water on your irrigation. Or you can look at your toilets or your showers or different fixtures in your home and understand which ones are inefficient, which ones are efficient, where you should actually focus dollars on kind of improving those inefficiencies in your home. So that's really like the consumer side of the equation. And as we get into this disaggregation and better understanding fixture usage, we can be more kind of prescriptive about what we tell customers and how we can actually provide them with suggestions of how to improve their home's efficiency. And then Joe, do you want to talk about the kind of utility side of the equation?
Yeah, we're actually doing several studies right now for some of our utility partners to really help them understand the saturation, if you will, of efficient fixtures in people's homes. So, again, how many people have efficient toilets? How many people have efficient shower heads? How many people have efficient wash machines? And then based on that data, then they know where to kind of focus their conservation dollars. They know whether, okay, only 10% of people have efficient wash machines. So we're going to actually put some conservation dollars into getting more people to get wash machines. We'll subsidize those wash machines. Or only 30% of people have, 1.2 gallon flush toilets. So we're going to put some conservation dollars in to subsidize low flush toilets. So we're really kind of arming the water utilities with data they really never had before, and really kind of help them focus not only the messaging, but also the dollars around conservation to really kind of help create and change behaviors in their customers.
Yeah, not to go too deep into the weeds on this, but I imagine that data then is also useful for like the wastewater and sewer side because now they understand the flow differences that are happening because of those more efficient fixtures, right? And that could
Yeah.
change the strength of their sludge and all that kind of thing. So it's not just the water utilities that could benefit from this. It's also like there's a wastewater element that's really useful there. It's really, really cool.
Definitely. And one good example of that, we were asked by one of our customers in San Antonio to help them understand how many people have water softeners. Because as you know, water softeners put a giant amount of salt into the effluent, and that's actually becoming a problem in San Antonio. So they're actually considering actually paying people to remove water softeners now. But before they did that, they wanted to know, well, how many water softeners are actually out there? And we can actually find those in our, at least in the Flume customers there. How much water are they using? How often do they regenerate? And that helped them actually estimate how much salt was going into the effluent. So again, this data didn't exist before. And now because we have all these flumes out there collecting data, we can actually provide them with this data. So it's
Hmm.
pretty cool.
Yeah, that gosh, that's just the interconnectivity of all this stuff. I mean, it truly is one water. So, but yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about utilities and communities, industrial users as well. Like, what steps can each of them take in terms of these conservation efforts and stuff, especially in the context of the drought out west? Like, how are utilities trying to conserve water? How are communities being asked to conserve water? And how's this affecting like industrial users and agricultural users as well? Because obviously they're a big, big part of how much water is used on a regular basis.
Yeah, it's a good question. So on the utility side, we're really focused on residential homes initially. Industrial applications, agricultural applications, it's kind of a separate market that definitely needs optimization as well. But our
Hmm.
initial focus is how can we help those communities and those residential homes change their habits, reduce consumption. Going back to everything we've talked about in terms of this data collection, it's it's really taking that data and going from one data point per month down to that 5 second granularity and being able to provide that end use information to the utilities so they can help prescribe certain specific conservation measures, and knowing that, okay, a certain percentage of customers throughout the district are using irrigation this many times per week, this much water is being used for it, let's focus our conservation programs on irrigation reduction. Or we're seeing, water softeners are being used every night and there's hundreds of gallons of water being wasted through that. How can we kind of prescribe programs to help reduce consumption there? And so it really comes back to being able to see that data and then make real, educated decisions based on the information we're providing to utilities.
Hmm. Yeah, just highly targeted messaging. Because when you have those specifics to the granularity that you're speaking of, it makes it a lot easier to give an actionable to someone that's more executable, even.
Exactly, exactly.
So,
It's funny too. There's been a lot of grassroots kind of stuff I'm seeing happening in Marin County as a good example, where like entire neighborhoods or HOAs are, again, like to use your word, they're doing a little bit of a gamification, and neighbors are competing with each other on how little water they can use. And they're really getting into it actually, because now they're armed with all this data, they can actually do that. And it's becoming, like I said, more of a grassroots effort. And there's things on, people are posting stuff on Nextdoor about it, and people are really getting involved. So it's kind of cool to see that.
yeah,
Yeah, no one likes to hear that their usage is 50% higher than the average in the neighborhood. So it definitely, there's ways you can kind of notify customers and help them really really change their habits with a competitive aspect to it.
Yeah, and just societal pressure in general is
Yeah.
such a good motivator, right? Yeah, that's really, really cool. My last question here was more about, so we've talked a lot about the stuff out west. Obviously, water conservation isn't just confined to the Western U.S. or confined to drought or arid regions. Um, I wanted to know if there's anything for the people who live in the Eastern U.S. where water seems to be more plentiful. Like, for example, I live in Chicago or right on Lake Michigan, plentiful, bountiful water, right? But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing similar efforts to what we're seeing out west, maybe just not to the same extremes that we're currently experiencing. Are there lessons that you guys think that translate from the west to the east in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I think everybody should conserve water. Um, we have, for instance, Chicago's market for us. And it's not because people want to conserve water. We do a lot of surveying of our customers. The reason why people buy our device, in the Midwest and the East Coast for water is more plentiful. It's more about protection of your home, protection from leaks, because one of the things we do really well is leak detection. And on the West, people don't want leaks for two reasons. One is they don't want to waste water, and two, they want to protect their home. Nobody wants to have a leak in their kitchen and have $100,000 worth of damage. On the East Coast, it's more driven by just protection of property. We see there is an additional problem, though, that you did mention on the East Coast and certainly in the Midwest and places like Detroit, which is more about wastewater. So you're not conserving water because it's not plentiful. You're conserving water because there's too much water. So we're seeing that the utilities are interested in our solution because of the wastewater problem, not so much that we need to conserve water. So it's kind of a different markets for us and different drivers. Certainly everybody should conserve, but again, it's not really top of mind, we're finding, and from Midwest on.
Hmm. Oh, it certainly isn't top of mind for the people that I know in the Midwest. Like
Yeah.
I said,
Well, when
like
you're,
it's just a way
I,
of life. Like water just exists here, and it's
yeah,
not
and
the same as California.
if I ask somebody in Ohio what their water bill is, they can't even tell me because they don't even know because it's like such a low number, it doesn't even matter. You
Hmm.
ask somebody in California how much their water bill is, they know exactly how much water bill is because it's in the hundreds of dollars. So
Hmm.
it's a very different markets.
Yeah, the value and cost of water, those aren't necessarily equal.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys both so much. This is a great conversation. I'm glad to hear about your product and how it's helping to do conservation and stuff. How it's reaching customers at a ground level is really, really cool. For everyone who's watching, you can learn some more about this. I'll have a link in our description below. As well, wanted to let you know we have a Western water crisis page where we're updating daily with some drought news on how people are trying to overcome this current drought and how they're conserving water, what the new rules are for different areas of California and out west. So check that out daily. You can get some cool stuff there. And thanks again both to Joe and Eric. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.